All right. All right. My name is Ivan Raiklin. I got several hats: angel investor, startup advisor, particularly in the sharing economy space and legal tech. And tonight I do my Wednesday night show called Sharing Economy. And some of you guys call it sharing economy, gig economy, on-demand economy, collaborative consumption, whatever. I'm sure there's a couple other names that I'm missing, but those are the general terms that are used nowadays. And tonight's guest is Harry Campbell, who I've been emailing and tweeting and engaging on social media back and forth for, I don't know, it's been about maybe 6 to 7 months in the springtime when I just started getting into the whole analyzing the sharing economy. And I started off doing it with the rideshare industry, which is known as Lyft, Uber, Postmates, DoorDash, etc. But basically, a year ago, Harry started off driving himself, and then he created a blog. And everybody that I know that's in the rideshare industry, I always tell them, you need to go check out Harry's blog if you want to do better at what you're doing, because he is the single best source on the internet for the rideshare industry. So you've carved out your niche. I think I stole some of your thunder in terms of your intro, but go ahead and continue from there, Harry. First off, I want to say, again, thanks for coming on board and coming onto this Blab. I know you're busy with the blog. You're a guest writer for Forbes. I think I keep on filling in the blanks, so I'm going to at this point.
Not a problem.
Introduce yourself to folks.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, Ivan. First of all, I'm glad we were able to hook up and finally come, and I can check out what all this Blab stuff is about. And so now I'm kind of getting a feel for it and seeing how it works. So far, so good. But yeah, I think you kind of covered it mainly. I actually started driving for Uber and Lyft about a year and a half ago. And at the time, I was working full time as an engineer. I had a little bit of a blogging background. I had been real intense passion and interest in online marketing, internet marketing, but I hadn't quite found the right project to really devote a lot of time to. And I think at the time when I started driving, Uber was worth about $10 billion. There were about 100,000 drivers, and I went to Google after my first few nights of driving and said, all right, there's got to be some resources, some blogs, some websites, some forums out there. And I went and typed into Google, probably Uber blog or Rideshare blog or something like that. And I couldn't find a single resource or a single blog that had consistently updated content. There were a few out there that had a few posts up here and there, but just randomly interspersed. And a light bulb kind of went off in my head. And within a day or two, I figured out what I needed to do, started the Rideshare Guy, and the rest is history, although there's a lot that happened in between.
For 4 or 5 years at that point.
What's that?
As ride sharing had been out for about 4 or 5 years at that point.
I mean, I'd say about a year and a half ago is really when I started, is when things really started picking up. I mean, actually, the first couple of companies to start were Sidecar and Lyft in San Francisco back in the day, before Uber was kind of doing their black car model. And actually, Lyft and even more so, Sidecar had more of the more dominant model that we kind of see today with, the peer-to-peer ride-sharing model where, normal people go out and drive their cars. And it wasn't until Lyft and Uber started having Lyft and Sidecar started having a ton of success in 2012, 2013, Uber said, hey, we got to get in on this. And well, now we know what the situation has played out to.
Right, exactly. So you talked about a little bit of history on why you got into the blog, and basically what sort of information can people find on there? I mean, I read a lot of it. I get your emails. I check out, you made the app.
Yeah.
I'm actually interested in how you went about and getting all that stuff set up, because it sounds
Definitely.
Like your own, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I've kind of taken the approach that, especially when it's, when you're starting something on your own, the nicest thing about starting a blog or starting something online is that there's a very low barrier to entry. You don't need to spend a lot of money. You start putting up content and you can really take care of a lot of stuff on your own. Now, it's definitely a lot of work, but at the same time, I've been able to kind of slowly grow my team. And now I have 6 or 7 people that are out there helping me, part-time workers that do everything from writing to, in the back, behind the scenes, virtual assistants, people who help me with web design, all of that good stuff. So there's definitely kind of a lot that goes into it, but I'd say what I actually do, I mean, really at the core of my site, what I try to do is just help drivers, help people who are interested in working in the on-demand economy, whether, I mean, I started off with just rideshare services like Uber and Lyft, but now I'm starting to cover services like DoorDash, Postmates, and all of these delivery services that are popping up. And really, I talk about everything from strategies that'll help you make more income to covering more policy type issues like taxes and insurance. We do weekly news roundups and kind of give our analysis and our feedback. And then we even do more lighthearted stuff like, we'll do joke articles here and there, what to do, how to handle, certain situations and things like that. So it's really kind of a mix of content, but I think that basically the product that I offer on my site is content.
The great aspect of it is that the list that you have for each state, the insurance rules, which insurance companies are actually providing that sort of service to provide that gap coverage that you need in order to be a legitimate, fully insured rideshare driver.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I've started to definitely combine a lot of, basically how I look at it is I try to see what do drivers need. I mean, the first thing I saw pretty quickly was that there isn't a central place for a lot of drivers to get help, to get information. And you could start and become a new driver and you may never even meet someone from Uber or meet someone from Lyft, and you might have a lot of questions when you get on the road. And those are the kind of problems that I try to help with. And then we have these big kind of policy issues with things like rideshare auto insurance. And so for me, I've gone out and basically sourced a bunch, we kind of keep basically a list by state of all the insurance agents. And I kind of turned that into a monetization opportunity for me, because we go out and basically say, hey, if agents are recommended to us, or if drivers in my community go out and use these agents and tell us about them, we go out, we talk to them, we vet them, well, not physically, but over the phone or whatever it takes. And I have one of my writers, Scott, who handles all of the auto insurance advertisers on our site. And then in that sense, we're able to find agents who are reliable, who are trustworthy. If we get any negative feedback, obviously we look into that. We've never gotten any negative feedback out of any of the agents listed on our site. And at the same time, it's providing a pretty valuable service for drivers, because they can go to our page, which we keep updated, and boom, they can see, hey, all right, I'm in California, here are my options, and they know exactly who they can get insurance from. And we have a bunch of agents by city and things like that.
Nice. So how many guys are on your team?
So obviously I'm full-time now. So I actually quit my day job as an engineer about 6 months ago. So for me, I've been full-time for about 6 or 7 months. And along with me, I have 3 writers. Three of my writers, so Christian, John, and Scott. Scott and Christian also do a bunch of advertising and partnership type stuff for me. And then I have 3 virtual assistants behind the scenes who nobody really knows about or sees, but they do a ton of work. Everything from kind of like doing, what's that?
On a full-time basis?
No, everyone is part-time. I mean, they do everything from, kind of things like doing show notes, a lot of social media stuff, and then a web guy who handles all of those WordPress problems that I have and don't know how to solve.
Hey, real quick, Harry, before we continue, I just wanted to introduce you to Ario Kashani. He's the CEO and founder of a company called Split, which is based out of DC here. I'm not sure if you guys have engaged yet.
Yeah, I've heard. I haven't spoke with Ario yet, but I saw a couple articles about their company. I think we may have even featured one of the articles about Split in one of our roundups in the past couple weeks.
In the last week or two. So I just wanted to also I just sent once you confirmed, Harry, I figured this morning I sent an email to Ario to see if he had a minute. I think there's some synergies, maybe as far as content that you could make on your blog, and then obviously it's beneficial for both of you. I figured it would be good for you guys to meet.
Cool. Sounds good.
Thanks for the invite. Can you guys hear me? Am I on?
Yep, you're
on.
Thanks for the invite. I'm sorry I'm a little late. I was trying to get home in the office. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Doing well.
Good.
Speaking of Split, for those that are going to be listening after on the replay, the Split is obviously the 4th player, more or less, in DC. I don't know. Ario, you want to talk about it real quick?
Yeah, sure. I like to think of ourselves as the first player in DC because we were the first to launch a true shared ride product. So we're Split. We're a real shared ride company, we use a very powerful algorithm to deliver to find where people overlap in their transportation needs, and then we get people to share the ride together. So it results in a very affordable service that's also very convenient. The way it works, for those who haven't heard about it or tried it yet, is that you go on our app, you tell us where you are and where you're going, and we immediately make an offer to you, which includes how quickly you'll be picked up, typically within a couple minutes, a window of when you'll be dropped off, and then an upfront price. And if you are happy with that offer, then you book it. A driver comes and picks you up right away and heads to your destination. The big difference there is that on the way, we're finding other people going the same direction. So you're likely to either have somebody already in the car when you get picked up, or pick up other people on the way. And our drivers are similar to Uber and Lyft, are independent contractors who own their own vehicles. And so the Rideshare Guy is a very relevant part of our world. So it's really great to meet you. Well, maybe not yet in person, but at least yeah, exactly.
In the background, you can see I just threw up an article that just came out today in a website called technical.ly, and they report on the DC tech scene, and they do a lot on. They've been writing about how Lyft Line is actually launching tomorrow in DC. Also, they did an article on Split. So I don't know, Harry, if you didn't know about it, it's a good resource to go to see what's going on in the DC scene. But you're more like
cool.
on California and then the nation as a whole. But maybe
yeah, I mean, I'm obviously based out of California, but I would say definitely in the past year there have been more than a few companies who are starting up in DC or NYC or even Boston. So for me, that's good because once one of them is ready to fly me out there, I'm all for it.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to do that in the not too distant future. Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like a lot of the exciting stuff happens out in the West Coast, but we're doing some fun stuff here too. I think the East Coast in general, DC in particular, gets kind of forgotten in the shuffle, but there's some cool stuff happening here, and we're really trying to we're approaching our business from a very holistic standpoint of thinking about transportation in cities as a whole. And so when we think about the decisions that we make about expansion or about service parameters, things like that, we try to take into account all the stakeholders, which, the obvious ones would be the passengers and the drivers. But beyond that, we also try to think about how do our decisions impact the city, the traffic conditions, and we really, really believe in trying to get cars off the road. That's kind of the ultimate mission for us, is to get cars off the road, and not just by people keeping their cars parked and using us to get around, but people really being able to think about leaving their cars behind altogether and just not even purchasing a car. So in some ways, our mission is a little bit unique to us because that's what we were built on, and we're trying. So hopefully we'll have the ability to bring you out to DC to check us out. But someday maybe we'll even be out west, and then you can use us every day.
Cool.
Definitely.
Hey, Ario, thanks for jumping in. You have any questions for Ario or vice versa, Harry?
No, sounds good.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a big fan of the Rideshare Guy. Lots of valuable insights you pulled out of it. So, and thanks for you mentioned that you featured us, or at least you included us in. I
think we linked to one of the articles.
Thank you for doing that.
I don't remember what was said, but hopefully it was.
Everything is important. Everything means a lot to us. So every little bit helps. I appreciate it. And if you're ever swinging by DC, please let me know, or worst case, I'll get your info from Ivan and
cool.
And we can meet up. So anyways.
Sounds good, Ario.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
All right, take care.
See ya. Cool. I was glad I could connect.
Cool cameo for Ario.
Yeah, it's in your space. So let's continue the discussion, Harry.
What's that?
Again, let's continue the discussion.
Yeah, sure.
You said you only had 30 minutes, right?
30. We can keep going. It's fine. I'm not too pressed on time right now. So.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to actually ask you in terms of, So a year ago, I kind of basically, I think, started listening to your podcast from episode 1 because I found
Okay, cool.
probably about on episode 7, and then all of a sudden you just started cranking out content, the blog,
Yeah.
pieces, then you had guest posts and guest writers, and I'm thinking, man, how's this guy's doing it? And then you finally announced you you quit your full-time job, and I'm like, okay, now he's able to probably come up for air.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean,
all that
what's that?
Early on, you had your virtual assistants already set up in order to
Early on, it was mainly me. And I mean, I was working full time at the time. And I'm not going to lie, I may or may not have done a little of Rideshare Guy work at my day job. As long as you're getting your work done. So I used to work as an engineer for Boeing, and, big 100,000 person company. Obviously, it's kind of easy to fall through the cracks. And, I was a good worker. I kind of got my stuff done on time, but at the same time, there's not a whole lot of reward in a day job for kind of going above and beyond and like figuring out ways to do things more efficiently. If you get, your work done in half the time, they'll give you double the work. So for me, I kind of just leveraged all of my downtime at work, and I was really spending, honestly, a lot of time outside of work, and, even a couple hours here and there at work, kind of working on my site, working on my blog. And at the beginning, I did have a couple guys that were helping me with some of the content, but not on a paid basis, just more because they were interested and passionate in the industry. And I think that's kind of one of the things that, even though as I've tried to scale up, and we now produce 4 articles a week, 1 podcast every 2 weeks, 2 YouTube videos, and then I write an article for Forbes once every few weeks. So it's definitely a lot of content. And I know that for me personally, as I've kind of tried to scale up the content and our content strategy, I've really tried to keep on hiring people that are really passionate about the space. Because first of all, I can't afford to pay them a whole lot of money. I definitely, try to compensate them well. But at the same time, on a part-time basis, if someone's only working 5 to 10 hours for me, it's not going to be a ton of money overall for their budget. But I have hired all of my writers. All of my writers are drivers. And I think that right there makes a huge difference. You see a lot of people pushing out content, and right off the bat, you can tell that they just don't understand the industry. They don't understand what it's like to be a driver. And that's, one of the most common complaints people have about when they're talking to Uber chat representatives or Uber customer service representatives, that there's this huge disconnect between what it's like to actually be a driver and what Uber is telling you should do or what should happen. And being an Uber driver isn't rocket science. You can go out and drive a few nights and figure out a lot of stuff. And and then when you write about it, you come from a place that understands the industry so much more. And for me, I'm tried to develop a really long-term, I have a very long-term vision in mind with my site, that I'm not trying to, go out and tell people, hey, driving is amazing. It's the best thing ever. You have to become an Uber driver right now, because people would see through that pretty quickly. There are a lot of people who are out there, and it's an amazing solution for them. But at the same time, there's also no doubt that there's a lot of feelings that Uber basically doesn't care about its workers, right? That Uber tends to do this or that, right? Or that Lyft does this or that. And so those are the issues I try to kind of, basically my style is to really just tell it like it is. And that's kind of what I try to do with every piece of content we produce.
I haven't listened to that's what I get from the podcast, is that you basically tell it like it is, which is great. You're an authority at this point, and you know that. So yeah, good sizable following. Hopefully this will increase on that. But yeah, those that are just jumping in, Harry, the Rideshare Guy, is the authority on rideshare in terms of the blogging space. And he also does guest posting in Forbes. So my question to you is kind of a personal one.
Bring it.
Not like in the personal sense, but personally that'll be applicable for me and my business. What did you use for creating your app?
So actually, it was pretty funny how that came about. So when my site in January was kind of starting to get some traction, I was up, maybe getting close to 1,000 people a day coming to my site and starting to get some real traction. A reporter from Wired reached out to me. Her name was Jessie Hempel, and she interviewed me over the phone. And I actually thought that it was just for kind of a piece around Uber. She asked me a bunch of questions about how I got started and all this good stuff. But a lot of reporters often ask that because I have a pretty unique and interesting story. Mm-hmm. And when the article actually came out, it was all about me. And I think the title of the article was like, what was it, like Meet the Dude Who Blogs About Rideshare or something like that. I think I should probably look it up so I don't butcher the title. But let's see, what was it called?
Lyft are crazy about.
Okay, yeah. My Uber and Lyft drivers are crazy about this dude's blog. I knew there was a dude in there somewhere. So yeah, you can check it out. And they used a nice little headshot. And this was, one of the featured articles on Wired, which is a huge online, and it's like very well, the thing about Wired is they're very well respected, but they also don't produce a million articles a day like a Business Insider or like a Fortune or a Forbes that's doing, has hundreds of articles going out every day. Wired only does, a handful of articles every day. And so on the day this article posted, I think I had obviously an all-time high, but I think I had 12,000 page views on my site. And that was when I kind of realized, first of all, the power of the media to kind of spread awareness about my site. It also ended up getting me a ton of future media opportunities with people basically reaching out to me and saying, hey, we saw that you're featured in Wired. We want to talk to you about this issue or that issue. And then actually and I got a lot of pitches. So basically I got a lot of pitches, a lot of visitors, and my traffic just kind of automatically boosted and was at it doubled or tripled kind of consistently after that. And, one of the pitches that I got, though, was from a guy who just literally just offered to create my app for free. And so he, with kind of the hope that we would work on a future project. And so he actually ended up creating my app for free. He has a company called Great Time Apps. His name is Eli. And it actually, I was pretty surprised with the result. People really like the app. It's pretty simple. It's just a content aggregator, basically. And we haven't really done a ton of work on it, but it basically just aggregates the content from my blog, from my podcast, and from my YouTube channel. So that's kind of the gist. And it's also on Android and iOS. So that's a cool thing. When we released it, we didn't do Android first or iOS first. And now that I see his homepage, I'm surprised he doesn't have the Rideshare Guy app up there. I'm going to have to call him out on that.
You got this. That's the closest thing.
Yeah, he has a couple other apps in the App Store related to rideshare. So that's kind of how we got hooked up. And he's, he's been a good guy. I'm sure that he's looking for more clients. So I can definitely connect you guys at the end.
No, absolutely. So yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you was, what are your plans moving forward with the blog?
Moving forward with the blog, I'm pretty content to kind of keep on the path that I'm going. I mean, right now we're getting close to 500,000 page views a month. So as far as, growth on the traffic, it's been very, growth on the site has been very consistent. We're releasing 4 articles a week. And all of the other content channels that I talked about. We're obviously going to start integrating some advertisers and things like that. We've signed a couple deals with advertisers, but I mean, for me, it's always been kind of, I'm really trying to, when we do integrate advertisers or anything like that, obviously you have to be a little bit careful how you do it. So we kind of want to make sure that we want to make sure we're partnering up with companies that have drivers' best interests in mind. And there's kind of fortunately a lot of companies in that space. I know that on the blog front, we're kind of just continuing on the content. Me personally, I'm trying to hire more people basically so that I can I just like to focus on the stuff I like to do. I like writing articles. I like managing the business side of things, kind of being more of like an editorial role. A lot of people may not realize that running a blog seems pretty easy, but when you start having, high traffic, dealing with advertisers, dealing with emails, all that stuff takes up a lot of time. And so just figuring out, the most efficient way to do it all and basically how to run a business in a really smart and efficient way is really what I'm focused on right now. I have a few side projects that I'm working on that I'll definitely be announcing in the future. But yeah, so we've got lots of stuff going on.
So looking through your about page, and I know a lot of this stuff because I follow you fairly closely because your content is really solid. The preponderance of your revenue comes from the referrals, right? And then also now you're moving into coaching or not coaching.
The video. Yeah. So, I mean, Yeah, so that page I probably needs to be updated, but most of my income comes from driver referrals. So Uber, Lyft, Sidecar, Postmates, DoorDash, all of the companies. I generally only start talking about companies or only start featuring companies when they have somewhat of a national presence. So when they get to 10 cities or when they get to 15 cities, because for me, I mean, I could go out and promote all of the splits and all of those types of companies, but it really just wouldn't make sense because my audience is so diverse across the US. I mean, even my top city, New York, is only 10%. So that 10% is still a pretty big number, but I mean, it kind of goes down from there, right? 5% LA.
Radar, because they're only in New York and Chicago as of this week.
What's that?
Like the company Via is under your radar.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, companies that are only in a couple cities, I can't really do a whole lot with because frankly, I have to charge them a lot because I really try to limit my advertising partners. I don't want to have 100 companies on my site. And if you go through my site, you won't see many advertising partners. You'll only see a few, Your Mechanic, Stride Health, and then driver referral type stuff. So you won't really see a whole lot of advertisers because for me, I'm really trying to establish long-term relationships with companies. I mean, there's really no shortage of companies that are trying to do, mileage and expenses. So for me, I'm instead of, taking a few $100s here and there, I'd rather establish a relationship with a company who wants to use my brand over a year or over 2 years. And we set up something that's super mutually beneficial and come up with a bunch of content that is really like, I don't know if I could swear, kick butt, but
no.
So I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do. And on a personal level, I'm really looking to, on a personal level, to kind of leverage. I have a very specific set of knowledge that I basically spent the past year and a half talking to drivers, doing all these services myself. I mean, I interact with probably, I want to say probably over 100 individual drivers every single day, whether it's through a Facebook comment or a tweet or an email. That's kind of my big thing is that I really try to put myself on the ground, go out and not only do these services, but just talk to people about what it's like and what the problems are. And so that's really, if you email me, you've emailed me before and you know that I'm the one responding. I don't have a virtual assistant or anything like that responds to my email. You might not like the response you get, but you will get a response. So.
I like it, the fact that you're still able to keep up with responding on it.
Yeah, it's just about prioritizing, right? The emails, I spend a lot of time. I have my time tracking app right here, Rescue Time. I'll pull it up and see how much time I've spent on emails this week. It's probably a scary number, but so this week so far, I've spent 65% of my time on communication and scheduling. So things like phone calls and emails, which is obviously a ton of time. But at the same time, I think it kind of is something that other people aren't doing. When you email a blogger who has 500,000 people a month coming to his site, I can guarantee you he's not going to respond to you within one day. But if you email me, I will. So that's kind of just one of the areas where I try to stand out with what I'm doing. So obviously I can't stand out everywhere, but there are a few that I've kind of chosen.
It's amazing how you're able to actually keep up with that. I think you're about the tipping point where you're not going to be able to. You're going to need to triage it more.
Yeah, I know. I keep saying that I'm a little worried because I keep saying on my podcasts, on interviews that, hey, if you email me, I'm going to respond to you. And eventually I'll probably reach a critical mass where it's just I'm getting too many emails a day. But for right now, it's still pretty manageable. And honestly, I have a lot of these resources and a lot of the questions people have, I have answered on my site. When I'm getting, if I'm getting 25 questions a week about a certain program, then I go and write an article about it, or I go and answer that in a YouTube video so that then when people do email me, I can send them to that video. And so you may only get a link back in the response, but you'll get a really quality response when you go view that YouTube video.
It answers the mail literally and figuratively.
Exactly.
Excellent. So I wanted to ask your take on a couple things. So
sure.
Today, since we're talking live, Ola, which is India's rival to Uber, announced a massive 500 million Series F round. It's like a late stage round of funding at a $5 billion valuation. And I guess in general terms, what do you think about how ride sharing is going to go in terms of who's going to be the dominant player globally? Because it seems like Ola's huge in India. You got Didi, Kawidi in China, which are investing in Lyft as of, I think, this morning as well.
Yeah, no, they Diddy put an investment. I think they gave him $100 million. They gave Lyft $100 million a couple months ago. So there's that. As far as I'm really fascinated by the global industry or the global rideshare industry, because the U.S. is kind of a microcosm of what's going to happen in the world. So you can kind of look and see, hey, the taxis were disrupted in the US. All right, this model is eventually, innovation tends to happen first in the US with things like these apps and things like, rideshare. So we can kind of look, and it's almost like all of the competitors outside of the US are doing an amazing job. They're doing a lot, but they're adapting so much quicker than the taxi companies in the US. I mean, you still have taxi companies in the US who are striking when Uber's going into new cities and doing all of these really just kind of stupid things where, I mean, there's all of these articles that say, hey, every time taxis strike, Uber's downloads spike by like 600%, So you have and it really doesn't attack the root cause of the problem. A lot of these companies don't understand what they're doing. Internationally, though, it's a completely different ballgame. I've written a few articles on Forbes and on my site about it, but in short, the international scene is so different because in places like China and India, you have really established local players, right? So Didi Coity is a Chinese-backed company, right? They're very in tune with the local scene, right? They know exactly how drivers or how passengers want to use their service, so a big popular app in China is WeChat, and like how passengers are interacting with this WeChat app to call for rideshare. In India, for example, right? In India, Uber was very slow to realize to the fact that, hey, a lot of these people don't have credit cards. They don't, for them, cashless transaction is not easier, right? They have a mobile phone. They want to call it from that, and they would rather, pay by cash. And another example, and sorry, I'm jumping from China to India, but another example in China, I think Didi or one of the competitors has a service where, hey, if a senior who doesn't use a mobile phone wants to call a ride, they can call a hotline, and then Didi will dispatch a taxi over to them and take that ride. So you really kind of see it, what I guess the best example of, why I think Uber is going to be facing so many challenges is because they don't understand the local markets. And frankly, it's very difficult. I mean, even in the US, so the two strategies that were used by Lyft and Uber when they started really mega expanding in 2013 and 14 were very different. Uber actually sent out local teams of 10 to 15 people to every city that they launched in, so that they could really kind of immerse themselves in the city life, right? Hey, what are the events that are going on? Where are people going out and all this stuff? While Lyft managed everything from San Francisco. And even to this day, Lyft now has a few people on the East Coast, Midwest, but Uber has hubs. I mean, they have a big hub in Washington, D.C., for example, which I think is the center of their East Coast operations. And so when you look at that and like what's happened in the US going internationally, I think that's kind of the big problems that Uber is going to face with these established players. They're not going up against Lyft in China. They're basically going up against themselves in China, right? It's almost like how in the US Lyft is to Uber. In China, Uber is to Didi Coity, and in India, Uber is to these other companies. So that's why I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because frankly, I don't think the outlook is that great. I mean, Uber is investing $1 billion cash into China, but they have a lot of potential problems, a lot of challenges. I mean, even look at it from a government perspective. Do you think, in addition to the actual, China just imposed some pretty strict regulations as far as data and things like that a few months ago on all of the rideshare companies, so not just Uber, but also Didi Coity. But I mean, when you look at it from a perspective of the Chinese government, do you think they want a Chinese-backed company to succeed or an American-backed company to succeed? So there's also probably some inherent bias there too.
No, absolutely. A very substantive answer. Obviously, you've been doing well.
I mean, China is definitely, the future of all of this is going to be, as going international. I mean, Uber has 400,000 drivers in the US, but they have total, they have 1.1 million drivers. That's 700,000 drivers worldwide. So according to them, they released these numbers a few weeks ago. So, I mean, right off the bat, you should see that, hey, the US is obviously this huge market that they are dominating, and they have potential beyond rideshare that they can go into logistics, delivering food, delivering packages, and build this huge logistics network. But at the same time, just the rideshare space alone in China is absolutely massive. In India, it's absolutely massive. So, it's going to be really interesting to see how they do. Frankly, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're not going to do well, but I think that they're going to face some pretty stiff competition.
But I mean, demand for ride sharing in developing countries I think is greater than in developed countries, because there's that big gap between those that have vehicles and those that don't. And so the demand is going to be a lot higher for services like your Lyft lines, your Uber pool.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, one of the things that Ario touched in was Split is that, I mean, hey, that these carpool, these more like actual rideshare services like Uber pool, Lyft line and Split, right? That they are basically, when it gets to a certain point, you can only reduce the cost of a ride so much, right? Because you're always, I mean, obviously there's self-driving cars on the horizon, but who knows how long that would take. I mean, there's going to be a ton of regulations and laws and, accidents that are going to happen with a computer, and then all this regulation is going to come down. So I don't see that as an immediate threat, but in the near future, in the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be all these services expanding and going for this rideshare model, because as long as you have someone sitting in the driver's seat, you have to pay them a certain amount, right? There's a lower bound to what you can pay them. You can't go below, whatever that number is, and Uber has definitely flirted with it in the US, but whatever that number is, you can't go below that. But if you can use Uberpool, use Lyft line, services like that cut the cost of the ride in half for the passenger and pay the driver a similar amount, that's when you start to see a lot of these people who couldn't use Uber before because they physically couldn't afford it, or now they're ditching their car to go use these services.
Right. I'm almost thinking of getting rid of my cars because I just hate driving. Because think about the time lost. If you're sitting as a passenger.
Yeah. Honestly, I went up to LA the other day and I tried to park in Brentwood, which is kind of a notoriously busy area for a meeting. And the whole time I was just kind of kicking myself. I should have parked at my parents' house and taken an Uber here. It would have been so much more convenient. I ended up, paying a couple bucks for parking. At that point, it's almost close to a wash with the gas and time spent. So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I got 2 quick questions before we open
Sure.
up to the folks that are in here that are live. So first one is, when you talked about driverless vehicles, how do you think that the driving industry, and like strategically? I know obviously everybody's going to know once it occurs, you're not going to drive and make money, but then go that one step further. What do you think the impact's going to be?
As far as to society or more driver specific?
Just impact on society and efficiency. I have my own. I wanted to hear you. You're also.
I mean, honestly, it's something that I've kind of just started researching. So I'm not quite an expert. I'm nowhere near an expert on self-driving cars, although I do have a couple potential podcast guests lined up who are. And so hopefully I'll be educating myself in the future. But I mean, in short, I think that people are. What's that?
You're not going to have Elon Musk, are you?
If he'll come on, hey, I'll probably tweet him. I'll tweet him and ask him. I don't know if he'll see it, or I doubt he'll respond, but I'll ask him and see if he's interested. But
I bumped into him in San Francisco at Premier Clubs, I guess, out there when I was out there in early October.
Nice.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, not a problem. I mean, as far as driverless cars, I think that people are underestimating the kind of societal challenges, the challenges that are going to happen with regulation. I read a pretty interesting article that the other day. It was from the MIT Review or the MIT Journal. And I mean, imagine a situation where you're in a driverless car, and the driverless car, you come into a situation where you have 5 kids in front of you, and you can either slow down and kill yourself or kill the kids, right? So these self-driving cars are going to have to, that might be a very, very unique situation and a very, 1 in a million. But hey, when self-driving cars start coming on the road, there's going to be more than 1 million rides a day, that's for sure. And so, are you going to go out? There's all these challenges with, with things like that. Like, are you going to go out and buy a Tesla, which tends to favor killing you? Or are you going to go out and buy a Volkswagen, which tends to favor killing the kids? You know what I mean? Like in that type of situation.
Society, what the algorithm is going to be in the vehicles.
Exactly. And I mean, obviously different companies are going to use different algorithms. So that there's going to be proprietary issues with that. And, I think just as far as the regulation itself, I mean, imagine the first time that because self-driving cars, when every car on the road is self-driving and they're all in an interconnected network of, they know exactly where they all are. It's going to be extremely safe to drive. You know what I mean? It's going to be very, very safe.
I'm going to say this, that I think probably in 10 years, it's going to be illegal for humans to drive.
Yeah, see, I mean, I think that the technology is right around the corner, but I think that there's going to be immense challenges with the regulations, with even things, like this, where it's taking Uber drivers' jobs, stuff like that. And I think the technology is right there, but I think it's going to be a long time before it's widespread adopted and every single car on the road is self-driving. You're always going to have the people who, like want to go Will Smith style, or what what movie was that? Where he was like, oh, iRobot, where he's like, I want to drive the car, not the robot, right? You're always going to have people like that. And I think it's going to be, almost even a generation before it's like fully adopted. So, I mean, I think that, it's a good thing, but I do think that it's not going to happen overnight. I think it's going to be a very long and drawn out process.
Hey, last question from me,
Sure.
Harry, was what are your thoughts on Get Around Turo, which used to be called Relay Rides? Are you getting questions about that? Are you blogging about that?
I've done a podcast interview with a guy named Zach Goldfein, who actually was renting out so you may have listened to it. If you've been listening to the podcast, he was renting out cars on Get Around and Relay Rides. And I saw the announcement that company which one is now called Toro? Is it Get Around is now
rebranded to Turo, which I think is a horrible rebranding.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a Ford Taurus, but
yeah.
Or like a bull Toro. But yeah, I mean, and that's funny that you ask, because that's kind of a tie-in to the self-driving cars. I mean, exactly. What I tell drivers right now is that if you're trying to build a future, if you're trying to save up for a down payment, if you're trying to pay for your kids' college, it's going to be pretty tough on an Uber driver's salary. If you're using it as supplemental income, if you're using it part-time, that's obviously the best case scenario. But at the same time, there are a lot of drivers out there doing it full-time. And I think that it's best used in kind of that entrepreneurial spirit where you're using it as a stepping stone to something bigger and better. One of those options is, hey, a lot of the best investors talk about, instead of work, there's always a trade-off between your time and money as an Uber driver. But when you can turn your car into an income-producing asset, right? Now you have that ability to sit back, go play golf, and have your car make money for you. So whether it's, renting it out through Get Around or Relay Rides, I just wrote an interesting article on the NYC UberX market, which is a very atypical UberX market, since it's really not UberX. It's only licensed cars are allowed. The mileage, the rates are much higher. And the article I wrote was basically like what it's like to be an NYC fleet owner. And one of the companies I featured was called Idle Cars. And the interesting thing about this model with Idle Cars is what they're doing is they're basically, hopefully, in the long term, hoping for short-term rentals. So if I'm a driver and I own a car, I can put my car on their platform, and someone who wants to go be a rideshare driver for a day can rent it out. So you have a lot of those types of models that I think are really interesting. And I mean, I know for me, I'm always thinking and looking about ways to really figure out how to, take what I'm doing and, make these things work for me, right? I mean, there's the opportunity, right? When I first started driving for Uber, I was making $20 to $30 an hour, more than my day job. And I knew that wouldn't last forever, right? A bunch of people are going to come and join. So take advantage of the opportunity while it lasts, start a blog about it, go and rent out your car. So I think that there's a lot of these types of opportunities in the sharing economy.
No, absolutely. I'm going to open it up. I probably have 50 other questions, but we're short.
No worries.
Jump in. James, thanks for jumping in. You got any questions for Harry? And who else is in here? Rush.
Let's see. How do we see the questions?
So the way that usually you do the questions is if the people that are in here do a /Q, then what is up? And then see, it comes up with a Q on the chat right there.
Gotcha.
And then also it comes up on the left side as a question, and then as a host or co-host, you can actually click on it, and it'll post up in the middle so that everybody that's following along can see.
Cool. Very cool.
So that was my example. And they just recently incorporated that about a week ago. This platform is updated probably 4 or 5 times a week, to be honest.
Cool.
A really good job with it. No, James said you did a great job explaining. Hey,
awesome.
So Harry, I'm going to extend this out to you. If you're ever out in DC, dinner's on me.
Sounds good.
And I'd definitely love to see you face to face. Let's see, you're out in LA?
Yeah.
I was going to go to LA Tech Week last week, but I got sick. Were you out there?
No, I heard about it, but I haven't really done too much of the conference scene yet. I kind of just do my own thing for now.
No, you got your head in the ground, you're digging deep, and you're definitely a subject matter expert in the space. So last thing is, how do people find you? How do they find more out about you other than the website? How do they engage with you? And then if they want to know more, you got some sort of a video course, right?
Yeah, I've got the video course too. So I've got a lot of stuff going on, but so that's actually something, and we're actually doing a lot of work on that video course right now. So MaximumRidesharingProfits.com is a course I started about 6 months ago. We've sold, we've sold courses to a few hundred drivers, gotten some really good feedback. We just added 3 new, videos. So we're adding new modules. We actually send out blog updates over there too. So it's kind of like a separate property too, where you can kind of go out and check out some information if you actually want to be a driver. But as far as contacting me, the Rideshare Guy, therideshareguy.com, you can always send me an email, harry@therideshareguy.com, and then I'm all over social media. And basically, if you just type in Harry Campbell or Uber or anything like that, or the Rideshare Guy, you'll find me. If you want to find me, it's pretty easy.
At this point, yeah. In January, it was still. Before the article in Wired, it was still kind of difficult to find you, but once that Wired article broke, it was a lot easier.
Yeah. So.
Hey, Harry.
Cool.
Appreciate everything you do, and I'm probably going to jump in on that when you do those webinars.
Awesome. Sounds good.
I know you've done them in the past with some other guy. I think he was Cincinnati-based.
Yeah, we did it. We tried out a webinar, so that may be something we'll explore again in the future.
Cool. Harry Campbell, our guest tonight on the Sharing Economy.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ivan. Take care.
Thanks. If you're interested in the Sharing Economy newsletter, it is you can subscribe by typing Sharing Economy to 33444. And I have my virtual assistants creating my website, so hopefully it'll be easier to get to my website and get all this information.
Awesome. Very nice.